What's up, everyone? We're on here with Bitcoin builders. I think Bunzi can't join today because he's at NFT Paris hanging out with all the cool kids and obviously leaving us here to FOMO. But yeah, we got an interesting week, and I got Speed Racer, basically my co-host of the day, and usually actually almost like an impromptu co-host because he's got some awesome takes. If you haven't already noticed on his account, he's been following like the Bitcoin DeFi side pretty actively and everything going on. But yeah, we got a lot of things. We got a lot of things. So you know, I think Speed. I don't know if you saw this, but like Bitcoin dominance, if you actually strip out all the stable coins, all of this like liquid staked token, LST, derivative, Bitcoin, Bitcoin dominance actually is like at 70% surprisingly. And I don't think we actually have had like a bull run, quote unquote, with Bitcoin being I would say like 70% dominant. It seems pretty absurd to me. This kind of goes back to what I think Monad intern tweeted out saying like, look, like we we didn't have a bull run if Bitcoin dominance didn't hit like 30%. So look, I don't know. This one feels weird. Everyone's got a different take on this bull run, but yeah, maybe it didn't happen. But wanted to know how you're kind of feeling, Speed, and what your sentiment is overall, and Matt's going to join as well, and hopefully Marvin as well. Which I'll invite him up here too, because the guys at Maestro have been cooking and making it way easier for builders to do things. But Speed, how are you feeling? Are you still bullish? I mean, I haven't seen anyone crash out as hard as you know, uh, at least CT on my timeline more recently, and it feels pretty crazy, but the
Yeah,
hate rally is probably going to be
I'm
probably
still
crazy.
very bullish Bitcoin. I mean, the structures and the setups are great. I mean, Bitcoin dominance is up there. If we just leave everything in, just like last cycle, we got up to as high as 73 on the chart I'm looking at, market cap dominance, and then right now it's at 61. So I mean, it still has some room to move, but I think we
But
will.
does that strip away like the 2 to 5% of Bitcoin that basically sits in wrappers, or
No, I think this is all encompassing.
gotcha? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so
So I'm
it's
just comparing to last cycle. But I think, structurally Bitcoin is looking really good. And, I think the FUD on the timeline just shows people are ultimately over leveraged to very illiquid assets or highly risky assets. Because, you know, i- everything else is looking very good from a setup perspective. And going forward, we can see this in the mempool. People are buying Bitcoin to hold it, and now the structure of the holders of Bitcoin are a lot different than previous cycles because now you have ETFs and you have countries and companies and there's less miners, holding as much Bitcoin as they have in the past because they're not earning as much, and so as a result, it just sits there. So I just don't know if we're going to see the big swings of Bitcoin dominance as a direct reflection of alt season. Although I still do think we are going to see some sort of alt season at some point. I just don't know if it's going to be at the sacrifice of Bitcoin like as much as it was before. Because again, you have a whole cohort of individuals buying Bitcoin, and before what would happen is the degens and would kind of front run the miners, saying miners need to sell. So they're going to sell. They've already, got their gains out of Bitcoin, they think, and they're going to then rotate those gains into alt tokens for kind of that last pump, and then everything just gets flushed. And so I just don't know if we're going to be able to use some of the past metrics like we have, saying this is going to be exactly the same. But I also still think we are going to see some sort of alt season. I don't know if it's going to be as crazy just because there's so many ways to speculate these days in the market than what we've used to. But the setup is great. I mean, the structure of Bitcoin, we broke out. We've basically been retest, retest, retest. We're oversold on the daily. We're oversold on the weekly. We had bad CPI report yesterday, and Bitcoin ended higher. That just shows you, and even the market did. Typically, if you have bad reports and numbers go up, typically it's telling you the market wants to reverse.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. I mean, look, like the way that I see it is all of CT feels like it crashed out from the speculative coins game, the easy money that all of these virtuals, DAOs, meme coins, pump funds, you know, the easy money of like the last I wouldn't even call it easy money, the cabal money, let's call it, over the last 3 months that was printed with all of these celebrity coins, fan coins, meme coins. Like yesterday, you had Full Send Community Coin. Um, Basically, in this market, they have a massive community. They sent like 60% of the coin to their manager. He tweeted about it. And even so, its effective market cap at its peak was only 25 million market cap. And that to me is a testament to like where we are at with this like retail speculation market, right? Like look, like people do seem to consolidate into specific assets now. I mean, you have this broccoli coin or whatever that CZ launched on BNB. It's I guess it kind of rehashed the BNB cycle of euphoria. I mean, for those of you who were in around last cycle, BNB meme coins and BNB shit coins and DeFi were basically, more lucrative. I mean, people were making like 4 or 5 million in a week from some of these coins, and so it's pretty wild what was going on there, and it's kind of strange. Honestly, it's kind of strange. Like Binance certainly is not the leader of this cycle. It's the dexes that are driving the narrative, driving the volume, driving the interest. It's not the centralized exchanges this cycle. And you have Binance announcing, I think a day or two ago, that they didn't sell. They were just making
They
a
got called
accounting.
out on it. They didn't even announce it, remember? I think
Oh,
someone
that's
called
right.
them out on it, and so then they came out and said it.
Yeah, that's right. So they announced their proof of reserves and their balance sheet effectively, and Binance seems to have kind of cleaned up their act and have stopped speculating on a lot of these coins, which means they're acting like in the true course of their business. I think a lot of that comes down to regulations and perception as to like what Binance is, and if they want to be legitimized as an exchange product, they can't be having this pseudo long balance sheet that is picking and choosing which assets to support. It's a misalignment of interest and incentives, right? And I think this is quite a net positive for centralized exchanges. I think centralized exchanges shouldn't necessarily be in the business of going long or speculating on these coins. Certainly they can in their VC verticals, but this is tokens that Binance was sitting on from let's call it listing fees or bribes, so to speak, or payments from foundations or teams to fast track the process, and them cleaning up the act and crashing out, so to speak. I think that's actually pretty healthy. I mean, like, who are the remaining sellers if not the retail themselves, which has seemed to capitulate it seems to have capitulated over the last little while. So it's definitely like it definitely feels like where we're at with the amount of risk in the system is way lower than it was historically speaking. You have the normalization of centralized exchanges. You have the normalization of speculation from retail. Yeah, CZ's doing his own thing with BNB and making it kind of a mimetic meme coin, launchpad, and it probably will have like a Tron like cycle that lasts 2 to 3 weeks. But it tends to just normalize, and so look, I think this is generally a net positive. It's just going to be a game of patience. But on the flip side, we got FTX, distributing $10+ billion to impacted individuals, and look, I'm not saying all of that is going to come back into the ecosystem, but I think that is quite tangible. That's a non-zero event, and we still have a very bullish regulatory framework from the U.S. Fed and SBR and everything else. I just feel like generally speaking, it's quite wrong to ignore all of this and only have your data point be retail sentiment, because that's typically not the driver of what causes the next catalyst.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point things are going to rotate back to quality, and that'll be quality, alt tokens, quality Bitcoin, Solana, meme tokens. Right now everyone's just super speculative, and at some point people kind of get fed up with that in the sense of like, hey, I've been rinsed too many times. I'm just going to go back and buy my tokens and just hold them, because ultimately, like you mentioned, there's a lot of cabals running a lot of these tokens. But it's kind of funny. This happened with Bitcoin right at 70,000 when before we broke out, and then we broke out, and it was funny how hedge funds were manipulating Bitcoin price by selling futures short and then buying spot. And you can see the exact same thing playing out with Ethereum right now. They're all-time high short Ethereum, and whales have been just accumulating. You can just see the posts, day after day, that there's been big buys of Ethereum. And I just saw that the amount of short on it is just insane. And what ends up happening is they pull those shorts and basically allow that springboard to go crazy. And so I think at some point we're going to see all this, and I do think we could see a catalyst with the FTX. It's going to be layered in distribution. I saw somebody post next week. It starts at less than 50,000 in the account, which I think the person mentioned was like around $1.5 billion. So it's not the big tranche. And then as we go into the spring, I think there's a time in March where some of these larger accounts will get released. But I think it's in the magnitude of that $16 billion total. And you'd have to imagine that, a good portion of that's probably going to flow back into some sort of crypto derivative asset. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I've kind of said, and I saw a couple different posts from people in the ETF space and Bitcoin space talking about the traditional 4-year cycle and how it's not going to be the degrees to which we've had in the past. And we have the institutional adoption, we have company adoption, we have different holder base, like I mentioned, when we have ETFs. We haven't had mutual funds yet, and there will be mutual funds that are going to include Bitcoin into their growth portfolios. So those will be by year end. Fidelity's probably going to take that market, but we also have a whole different philosophy of the Bitcoin miners themselves. We normally miners would have to fund their upgrades of rigs via selling Bitcoin because they couldn't go to the banking system to get a loan. But now MicroStrategy has basically come out and proven the point that they can go to the debt market, and people are willing to gobble that up. And we've started to see that with Mara and a couple others starting to actually hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet and actually acquire it. So as a result, the big sell pressures that we would typically see in previous cycles just won't be there because of that, and also they hold less because every having they're getting less in return. So ultimately, we may see less subtle pullbacks, on Bitcoin. Not to say we won't see pullbacks. Obviously, we will, um, but it may not be to the degree we've had in the past. Again, just because if a country buys Bitcoin, they're not gonna trade it. They're just gonna buy it and hold it. Same with companies. And a lot of people, when we look at mutual funds and in their Roth IRAs and stuff, besides rebalancing at year ends, most often those people aren't trading them. They're not calling their broker every week saying buy, sell, buy, sell. And so I think we'll see less volatility in Bitcoin. We'll see a higher Bitcoin dominance as a whole, but I still do think we are going to see alt season at some point. We are going to see some of these other protocol stuff take off, and meme coins, who've been consolidating for a while, have their moment.
Absolutely agree. And I think people are definitely like maybe misguided as to what a bull run really feels like. If this is kind of like your first one, Bitcoin tends to move pretty dramatically at 3 to 5 times in a year, and that's really how it works. I think the violent moves upwards is really what causes spikes, and it's definitely not easy to hodl anything. Quite frankly, not only Bitcoin, but even alts, for example. Like the reason why alts performed very well last cycle is because everyone just basically just sold out of them, and no one was allocated into them. And once you had major price action move on the majors, you had massive spillover effects, and I think we just have to like accept the fact that like Bitcoin is only 25 or 30% higher than the last cycle right now. That's not really material enough to say like that is the top of the bull run. I think if we really had a true bull run with euphoria, with interest, with adoption, I think we should be well over 150K. So look, it's taking its time to play out, but slowly but surely, I think we'll have the moment. And I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening on Bitcoin itself. Call it the on-chain ecosystem. You have Dog, which is announcing to go multi-chain with I think they have many bridge partners that they're trying to work with. I think it's a valid approach. As we see, you kind of have to bring your token to where the users are, and I believe Solana is actually the first token that they're trying to coordinate the Operation Dog. I forget what it's called. Domination. Uh, Dog domination, I think is what they're calling it. Um, look, I think that's good. It's going to bring a lot more, I guess, awareness that Bitcoin has tokens. If you ask most people on any other chain if they think Bitcoin even has tokens, they probably don't even know how to get them or that they even exist. Also separately, Mavens and Nomad are officially, converting Wizard with OrdKit into Magic Internet Money, and I believe they're going to be airdropping a partial supply of the tokens to the Bitcoin wizards themselves. But also, separately, they're doing a 10K PFP collection of Bitcoin wizards from Mavens himself. I think, look, if I was Udi and the Taproot Wizards, like I think they were obviously first with Wizards art, but I'd be lying if I said I'm not necessarily concerned about how the Taproot Wizards will perform, given that Maven is doing his own 10K collection, and they announced that it's likely free. Um, I mean, what that really means.
I'm bullish that I mean that's next week, actually the same day as the FTX release, but that this conversion. I was looking yesterday, I made a post about it because I bought Wizard back in the day, but that technically that's the second highest market cap rune that we have currently, and it's still sitting as a BRC 20. It's near 80 million market cap. There's not a huge holder base, but it is one of those that everybody knows who's been in the space, so it has its brand. And then to come out and say they're also going to do a free PFP collection, they're going to reward some of the wizard holders. They haven't announced how many you need to hold, and then they're already starting to kind of partner up with kind of some of these OG communities within the ordinal space. And it'd be interesting to see if this kind of sparks some excitement back into everything, because it's kind of been lull and people have been kind of afraid to put anything out there just because the sentiment's been so bad. And the question is the sentiment bad because nothing's been out there, or is the sentiment bad because the price action? I personally think, price action is part of it, but most of us didn't come for the price action. We came for the vibes, and for the longest time, vibes are always pretty good. But I think we've kind of reached peak low when it comes to vibes, and people are fighting each other because runes shouldn't exist, and this collection and that collection is causing troubles, or someone rugged this or that, when in reality it's like, people should just keep putting their head down and keep building, because some of the most exciting and crazy times in our space happened out of the blue, complete happenstance. No one knew it was going to happen, and all of a sudden things get released. Just look like Odin. Odin came out of nowhere kind of, and all of a sudden, man, this thing went crazy. You think about the runestone airdrops, and you think about all of these. The puppets mint was kind of a crazy time. Node monks was around that time as well. Kind of comes up out of the blue, and so our space has kind of been similar to what happens with Bitcoin and all these tokens. Is things can be dead, 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 and literally in like 4 or 5 days, you get a massive pump into the space. We just haven't seen one for a while, so now people are questioning: is this ever going to happen?
Look, I think if for those that are actually questioning it, it's like, it's very simple. This is not Sui, this is not Aptos, this is not Ethereum. This is Bitcoin at the end of the day, and Bitcoin matters to so many people that there is going to be a 0 to 1 moment eventually. what that is, I think we've never had more builders actually try and experiment and do things with it. So, do I know what's going to happen? No. Do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely, and I'm betting on that outcome. I wanted to just give the kind of stage to Marvin, because him and Maestro have been doing so much for making the development process, and for those who are building products or just doing things with Bitcoin in general, so much easier. I don't think we would be able to do half the stuff that we see here right now without tools that give us APIs, RPCs, mempool level data, collection level data, token level data, trading level information. Like everything is really powered by Maestro, whether you kind of know it or not just yet. But they've been a massive, I would say, leg up here as the builder, the builder ease. I think without Maestro, we wouldn't have that 0 to 1 moment. And I think a lot of like the Bitcoin startup labs teams are tapping into Maestro for their products. So wanted to just ask Marvin, like what's new, like what can we expect, and I guess what sort of pickup have you guys seen with builders and maybe like the development sentiment? We don't necessarily see that publicly as retail users, but wanted to hear like what that's been like more recently, if we're seeing more or less, or are we having developers crash out as well as retail?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yes, thanks for that intro. Yeah, we're less on the predicting market price, but we're very much grinding day in day out on like improving the developer experience. And that's really what we want to improve, and we feel like improving tooling at the basic level, it really like lifts. It's like create a tide that lifts all boats, right? It really helps people. It has like this secondary effect. Um, and so yeah, we're seeing like a lot of projects choosing to use APIs or our tools to streamline development, speed things up, and also just save money, right? Build an application with a smaller budget. And I think that's what made Ethereum or even Solana uh, very popular, is just the ease of development. And I think we shouldn't underestimate that. At the end of the day, like welcoming new developers and creating a good developer experience is key to kind of keep fueling innovation and bring creative people with great ideas to build applications with also good user experience, right? So we know retail cares about user experience, and to create that user experience, you need good tooling, and you don't want like a team having to rebuild the wheel every time new projects launch on Bitcoin and build from scratch. And UTXOs is complicated, right? There's a lot of unique challenges building on UTXOs you don't find other chains. Other challenges with like sniping, but also with like the mempool. And so that can be a kind of high barrier to entry. So if we can, build more things that kind of abstract that away or streamlines it, we create the right environment for people to come here, innovate, but also iterate, right? So it shouldn't take 6 months to build an application on Bitcoin. Like ideally, we should get to a point where people can come in and within a couple of months get something working online, and then kind of test it out, right? If it works, and see that product market fit.
Yeah,
um
absolutely. I think teams like Satflow, for example, are like a good example of that, where they had to build everything, mempool data awareness for their kind of first product, or first kind of launch, which was oriented on sniping, which was very fun. I think it was fun when a lot of people didn't have access to some of these tools. And then it became kind of PvP, and the mempool was and the miners were really winning for most of the value, or most of the mev and arbitrage. They definitely captured. There's been some misclicks where a snipe had to pay $8,000 or $10,000 to a miner, and then they flipped it for at the end of the sniping era, they were scalping for $50,000 purchase for $100 or $200. But teams like Saflo really had to build all of that infrastructure from scratch, and I think Maestro really accelerates what we have available to developers. whether it's like the mempool level aware information, collection level data, which I think you guys have added more recently. Um, that's also another topic of discussion too. Is we don't really have like a collections level database. So did you guys end up building an index for every collection and kind of having that data available on Maestro? I know there's been a lot of arguments for that, or rather against that, being that this JSON file being centralized with Magic Eden only having the information to some of these collections. There's obviously ways around it now with people building like parent-child collections around kind of the official, I would say parent to a collection. But did you guys end up indexing every single collection and segregating them within your data provider tools?
So not all of them, but yeah, we're trying to aggregate that collection data, and then make it available under like one unified collection endpoint. So we have the data from Magic Eden. We're putting data from other places as well, what's on chain, and so then that at least there's like one unified way where people can get that collection data. But yeah, it's a bit of a bummer that it's not all on chain or all in the same place. So we're trying to kind of make it easier and make that available in one place. But yeah, I don't think we have 100% of all the collections yet.
Got it. And I guess, from your perspective on like pickup or even like developer interest, I guess where do things stand right now, maybe where they were 30 days ago or even 60 days ago? Like, what does the developer sentiment look like for, inbound interest and people using Maestro solutions to build new, innovative, and interesting products?
Yeah, I mean, we've looking at our metrics on our platform, we've never had that many active accounts. So it's a constant weekly inbound of new signups. We're getting multiple new teams and projects signing up per day. So for us, it's like, yeah, we see people building. There's a lot of new teams. Many of them haven't launched yet, right? They're still building on testnet. So I expect a lot of new projects to go live, in the next couple of months, and I think bring a bit more diversity into the ecosystem. What we're seeing as well is kind of non-Bitcoin teams looking into integrating into Bitcoin. So there are a lot of like cross-chain wallets or cross-chain protocols that say they're like they're multi-chain, but they're all missing kind of like that Bitcoin integration and that integration with runes. So for example, we're talking with like Wallet Connect, for example, that have they integrate with over 200 chains, but their Bitcoin integration only allows you to like send and receive Bitcoin. So they're interested in like kind of beefing up their Bitcoin integration and be able to allow runes using runes integration into their Wallet Connect kind of wallet kit. And that's where it gets really interesting, because now we're kind of branching out to more these cross-chain protocols that have significantly orders of magnitude higher number of users and adoption. And a lot of these projects, the core gap right now is that they don't integrate with Bitcoin meta protocols. And so all of these kind of projects are projects we'll talk to, and we're like, okay, how can we help you, really, catch up to where Bitcoin is at right now? And people want to trade runes, people want to buy ordinals, but they want to do it with these kind of more established, cross-chain wallets and cross-chain protocols. And so I think that's where we're really focusing our time on bringing like these new players into Bitcoin.
Yeah, and look, I think if you guys can chat with MetaMask, that would be great too, because I think we recently talked about this a couple of shows ago. They mentioned that they're hiring like a Bitcoin wallet product manager, and so they're very much like focused and active in integrating MetaMask into Bitcoin. I think a lot of people reluctantly, it's my least favorite wallet, and I hate using it every time, but it still is like the most dominant wallet in EVM, and so I think just making it easy for people to come onto Bitcoin with whatever tools they have and are familiar with would be a massive leg upwards. I think if X is obviously fantastic, and they're definitely taking the most, like, I would say, exhaustive consumer approach to bringing features to everything and everyone. And we obviously love Jan and the Express team in general. And then Magic Eden Wallet, of course, initially had a lot of interest in Bitcoin, but it seems like the Magic Eden team has actually slowed down on the Bitcoin side, which is quite interesting. I wonder why that is, and it may be just volume related, but we haven't really seen.
They're trying to push the DEX for Solana out. That's coming up pretty quick.
Oh, what's going on there, Speed? What
Yeah.
is this Solana Dex?
So that's what they're working on right now, Magic Eden. So they eventually, so what they're trying to do, and again, it'll be good for the Bitcoin and Rune space as well, especially if we are trading on Solana. Is you can basically, they want to be able to take your Bitcoin and swap it for, for the Solana token, or take Solana and go for the Rune, and just try to find the best price. And so I know that's what they're trying to finalize now. Is they're basically gonna build the decks first, and then the next things they're going to work on is that integration of behind the scenes swapping for assets, in particular Bitcoin and Solana, to allow interoperability between the Bitcoin side and the Solana side.
Yeah, I mean, I think liquidity fragmentation is a massive general issue. We don't really have interop omni-chain, cross-chain swaps that work very well just yet. This is obviously, one of the downfalls and pitfalls of even Ethereum going multi-layer is, you have Ethereum based liquidity pools on Arbitrum, Optimism, uh, Ethereum itself, ZK Sync, Starkware, and everything around the sun. And the deepest liquidity still ends up being on the L1 there. I think people still trust it the most. It's been around for the longest time, and so using Uniswap, even its deployment on some of these other chains, there's a hesitation, right? Like the institutional LPs just don't want to take on the risk of a chain, breaking. We thankfully have not seen that in Web3 just yet. We've seen kind of rollbacks every now and then over the last 10 years or so, but we haven't seen a chain fail per se. Solana's obviously been down here and there when it was still kind of in its infancy, but I don't think it actually has gone down in a very long time. And despite it being very active in the meme coin era, we still had it work. And I think generally speaking, moving liquidity from one chain to another, it's friction, it's risk factors, it's these institutions, they got to explain their actions, and so I think that is like an important lesson for, I would think, like the Dog Army and Leo to take into account. Jobs on the Ordinal show just yesterday, and Leo's view was, well, if we just have like a 50K or 100K liquidity pool on every one of these chains, at least people can buy like $100 worth of dog. But look, I think if you don't have an asset that feels tradable, then you're just kind of selling NFTs on chain, and it's like a forced hodl system. And you need active, deep liquidity for there to be active, I would say, market makers and active participants, because we don't just buy and collect these tokens. That's I guess one part of hodling for the long term. But in most cases, you want to have attention from traders at the same time. Like, imagine Bitcoin only had liquidity to buy $1,000 or $2,000 at a time. Like, I don't know if we'd love it that much, and it would not have the interest from institutional funds and large hedge funds and traders and retail traders, and have the depth that allows us to do way more than we have with it right now. I think it's just a really good lesson to learn. Um, I see, Speed, that you posted up this Chimera thing. So what is this? Broadly speaking, it's a ordinals based ETF.
That's what it looks like. I don't know if anyone on Arch wants to speak to this. I just saw it posted in one of the chats I'm in, but it looks like they're basically going to maybe allow some people to take partial ownership of various assets through these things. You know, they've done that in other chains, and they've tried to do that. Remember, they did that with the Shroom, um, and you basically get a partial share. And so maybe that's what they're looking at trying to build is is people within these. I don't know if they'd be classified as a DAO or people would buy into them off the bat.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but I've been working a lot with them as they've done their launch. And what's live now is just one piece of the puzzle, because some of it will require like tapping into the liquidity pools on Saturn and things like that and AMMs. But worth kind of mentioning what they're doing. Super interesting. Essentially, the same way that you can get exposure to a wide variety of assets or similar assets through ETFs. You have a tech ETF, you have a whatever ETF, right? You can essentially get market exposure to a bucket of ordinals or other assets, right? And the way that they do this, which is pretty innovative, I think, and interesting, is that they actually on one end are buying up the base asset. Let's say someone wants to have like a pups ETF and like the pups ecosystem, right? And so you can have like a Bitcoin puppet, and then you can have, any of the other derivatives that, spread out through that, right? And on one end, you're going to have a pool where they buy the asset and that kind of serves as collateral. And then they're going to convert it for a rune or a token, right? An APL token in the art system, right? But something like that where you're able to essentially you can deposit your asset or somebody can deposit their asset. And on the other end, people can take out a position on the general movement of that asset type, right? So if they want to, and eventually what they can do is they can pull together each of these individual groups. Like let's say they have one for Bitcoin puppets and one for node monkeys and, all of these, right? And then they could actually pool those together to where you could take out a token that represented the market movement of all ordinals, right? Or all the top, you could have large caps, mid caps, medium, small caps, the same way that you would in ETFs in the general marketplace in TradFi. So super interesting opportunities here. I think some of us, it might not be as exciting to hold like a blue chip that may not move, or may move some, but you want that consistency, but you also want some exposure to kind of the alts gizmo or something that might move along with another one, right? Well, by doing that, you've got exposure to both.
That is quite interesting. I mean, the tough part about this is always like balancing, what the actual price is. If sentiment becomes far too bearish, um, these are almost like DAO tokens at the end of the day, where the market price for them can actually trade downwards from the underlying holdings. So curious how they kind of aim to solve that.
But you could do a perpetual on that, right? So if they tokenize it, now all of a sudden you could actually do perpetuals for ordinals. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think so. It just gets tricky. I haven't seen this execution just yet. And then Saflo just recently posted something interesting here, just teasing a new feature, which looks like they're going to start aggregating, at least from the listing side from Saflo, which I think is quite interesting because there is a lot of disconnect in price at times, especially when ordinal assets. And maybe this also works for runes, um, but it looks like they will allow you to cross list from their front end to Statflow, Magic Eden, and OKX, which is quite interesting. It means like someone can buy from whatever front end they're comfortable with, but Statflow is kind of like the listing manager in a way. Um, I think that's interesting, and maybe down the line they bring something in where it aggregates potential Magic Eden and OKX listings into the front end, and it kind of becomes almost like the non fungibles Jupiter of Bitcoin.
They're doing it for runes too. So, I was on a space with them the other morning, and this is what I've been kind of harping on because there's been so much development in all these different places. The retail average person just wants to go and buy a token for the best price. And so I think having a product like Satflow, or which Xverse has tried to do through their swap feature, is going to be super important as we hopefully build liquidity pools for more of these tokens across different ecosystems. So I think that's going to be our biggest thing forward, because ultimately, if you're not deep in the trenches, you don't necessarily know where something is trading. These things are coming out by the week, it seems like, as far as new places to trade. But I know they already, I think Runes Decks, they're, I think, partnering with, I think they already have some stuff integrated with DotSwap. They obviously already have Magic Eden. So, they're kind of moving in a direction to where
You're talking
it
about
could be a one
Sats
spot stop.
Terminal, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, that too. But I think Sapflow as well, but I'm not certain
Got it.
on that because I think that it's a competition for it. But I'm almost positive Satflow is also doing that, because Sats Terminal has some different things as well. But I just think that's a big need if someone can take that market, especially as, like I said, we're trying to get liquidity pools on Bitcoin, and with, I think, Arch's rollout, I'm hopeful we're going to start to really adopt it more on the main net, because we do have runes decks right now, we do have dot swap, they're just not utilized very much. They're basically just to sell into and arb into. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we were using those as primary trading vehicles, but unfortunately, everyone's still kind of fixated on Magic Eden Order Book, which is not a great way to trade a fungible. But I'm hoping once we can get some speed, kind of like what Odin did when it generated that excitement. I'm hopeful that we're going to start to move our main trading to some of these platforms, and then the aggregators will help us arb into these maybe order books and smaller pools.
Yeah, I think that's the direction that we're taking. I think it's the smartest one. There could be a possible. I think there's still far too many people that are just using Magic Eden as like the primary way to sell their runes, and not realizing that they can do it directly with their Xverse wallet. Um, I think Xverse has sell in their wallet, right?
Yeah, it's a swap
They
feature.
do. Yeah, the swap.
Yep.
Okay. Because I know Sats Terminal only has buys enabled right now, but yeah, Xverse has sells as well, and it'll instantly sell your tokens into the available liquidity pool. There's still like no aggregated sell type feature just yet. But I know Stats Terminal is very much like working on that as well, which is quite interesting. It is. I think the big question is like, where's the liquidity going to sit at the end of the day, and so yeah. Is it going to be on the L1? Is it going to be on something like an Archdex like Saturn? Is it going to be on L2s or even additional L1s? I think that's really like the big question mark. We have to, in order for Bitcoin to work, you have to have digital assets, both non-fungibles and fungibles, be of value to begin with, and obviously we've had that, but certainly not going the direction that we all expected them to go. But there has to be room for creating new digital assets, right? Like if you look at Ethereum, the reason why it was successful is because there was new tokens, new NFTs, new products, vaults, nodes that you could mint up. So it was like a viable way to create digital assets. Solana, in the same way, became a very powerful way and a powerful chain to build, I would say, assets of value, and maybe not assets of quality always, but, assets of value. And so, because we're living in like an on chain world, we don't really have real world assets, to the maximum degree. Obviously, Solana and Ethereum have had some real world assets and tokenized funds come to play with Fidelity and everyone else. But this is a digital landscape, and we need to be creating valuable digital assets or value in a digital realm for there to be economic outcomes for those that are here. Bitcoin hasn't necessarily had that just over the last little while, but we'll certainly. I think we will. It's just a matter of like time. But all things to say, like I don't really know where the liquidity is going to sit, and I don't
I
really have
think
like a strong framework of that more
for
recently.
fungibles, I think it has to sit on one of these layer twos, but has layer one interoperability, kind of like what Arch is doing, and even what this ICP product has done, in a sense that we need to have ways to where it can be aggregated on layer one, and the user themselves don't need to know where it's being traded to, but it's still being settled via Bitcoin. And you don't need to change your wallet. You don't need to move your wallet because if we think about ICP and just Odin, just because that's again fresh in people's mind, the total liquidity on that chain for those tokens are directly correlated with the amount of Bitcoin bridged to that network. So that's a very big flaw in a system like that. Versus if we have things that are interoperable with Bitcoin, native Bitcoin itself, the total liquidity is directly correlated with the amount of Bitcoin in people's wallets, Bitcoin wallets, which is much higher. So then, ultimately, if we can find ways to where the liquidity providers bridge their assets to these side chains, provide the liquidity, we have the speed and cheaper transaction fees that are occurring as a result of that, and the users themselves are on mainnet Bitcoin via their Xverse or Unisat or whatever Magic Eden wallet. I think that would be the ideal
So,
situation.
Speed, I got a counter argument to that because it will still take like one Bitcoin transaction usually to move people's Bitcoin over from their quote unquote Bitcoin wallet, right? Like I would say the vast majority of Bitcoin's TBL is not in Unisat wallets or in Xverse wallets. There's quite a lot of Bitcoin for sure. Um, but if we want to unlock the exodus of massive unlocks, is how do you get everyone that's I mean like one where what kind of Bitcoin wallets does Bitcoin even sit in currently, and what is the breakdown, and how do you get those participants possible to be using the on-chain ecosystem in any way, shape, or form? I think that like otherwise you're still let's just say transferring your Bitcoin from a cold wallet like a ledger into something like an Xverse. I could do the exact same in theory and transfer over my Bitcoin. Well, actually, I don't know if I can transfer it directly over to Odin. I think they do have a deposit address. So, in a similar way, like I can deposit my Bitcoin into like an Odin account, let's call it, which is an ICP canister on their own kind of app chain. But I guess the counter argument is like, well, this Bitcoin already has to be moved once, and so it's not really that we're tapping into the most native liquidity. Again, just plain devil's
That's
advocate.
fair. Yeah, that's fair. Because yeah, I see where you're coming from there. I just think if you really do want to build up a fungible ecosystem on Bitcoin, it can't be on Bitcoin directly. And the reason being is it's a pay to play environment directly on Bitcoin. Again, it could eventually be settled and you can figure out how that works and how frequent it is. But if you're trying to generate significant amount of transactions on this network, the prices would go up to where then the only transactions that would occur would be very high value transactions, i.e., big buys or big sells. Because if we get mempools up in the thousands again, no one's going to trade these fungibles that are trading for 50 cents. And so there's a happy medium between these two dynamics, I guess, speed and cost. And so that's where I think, right now, because there's hardly any trading volume, it's just fine. It doesn't, you're paying like a buck or two to basically make a buy or sells. But if we have people taking loans and you're trying to institutionalize some of this stablecoin stuff that are being built out, that for sure can't happen on mainnet. in the size and amount that would say happen on Lightning or other networks.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, look, speaking on Lightning, that's a good transition here because there's been a lot of development on the Lightning network. I say a lot, but it's still a state chain. It's still just used for payments, but there's more recently been, I think, USDT, which has announced that they're going to be going to Lightning. I don't know how they pulled that one off. Um, but I guess for the first time ever, you could be spending stables with the Lightning payments channel. Um, Maybe that's kind of cool. I guess I don't know what your thoughts are there. It's still no smart contracts, which is why it's fast, right? It's very limited.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this the other day that uh, big dot fun is settled. That they're
Oh
using
yeah, that's right.
Lightning
You mentioned
to.
that Big is using Lightning to
Yeah,
to
that's where
have.
you're bridging into basically to mint out these runes. So it's interesting. It just seems like that's been around for a long time, and it hasn't garnered a ton of adoption. I mean, there's a lot of people using it and things, but I don't know. I think there's still room for disruption in this space, and at some point we're going to get there. But I think we have to remind everybody. We're 5 years behind Solana. This protocol is only a couple years old. Yes, Bitcoin's very old, but we're dealing with a very rigid framework in how it works, and so we're basically trying to build a lot of things that are very difficult to build in a rigid ecosystem. And so, we think about why ETH kind of took off, last or back in 2017, and all their assets went crazy. It was all the protocols that got built up around it, and all the users of those protocols that were early got rewarded handsomely for doing that because of all the VCs and investment that went into that chain. And as a result, people had a whole bunch of liquidity to slosh around in that network, and it's done well as a result. We're not even into that phase one of infrastructure. I mean, we basically have, at this point, we have a wallet and we have some basic marketplaces. That's pretty much it. I mean, we have a couple things that are very small in use. We tap protocol and in some of these things, but they're still actively being built up and integrated, and it's not very user friendly. I mean, everything is very siloed in how things are being built. And I think, we're probably a cycle away from really starting to see the true potential of this marketplace, because what we've been kind of doing is using things and then we say this doesn't work. Like runes got built, everyone's like this doesn't work how we trade them. And now, like, just think of all the adoption and development that's happened as a result of that runes protocol release, and we aren't even a year old on that. And so I just think, people need to have that framework in mind when we're dealing with this. You can't just plug and play a smart contract from Solana over onto Bitcoin and expect everything to work perfect. It won't. And so as a result, we're needing to kind of, see what doesn't break and then go that direction. So it's just a lot slower, and in a degen environment, some people get washed out, and you can kind of see that's really happened, on our chain a lot here in the last weeks. Is they're saying, "Wait a minute, every why aren't we making millions of dollars like we have in the past? I'm out of here." In reality, all chains right now are struggling. We talked about that at the open. That if you look, everything is down 50 to 90%. So it's difficult to say that runes have failed or ordinals have failed if everything is down. It'd be completely different if everything was up hundreds of percent and all of our assets were down. But we're just not there yet. So it's yeah, I think it's exciting time. I just really think that people just need perspective about where we're at in this. And if people are in it for the intermediate to long game, I think this, at least I placed my bets here as a result. But if someone's in it for a quick flip, that's the Solana degen trenches.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't even know if Solana will be replaced by a Solana killer, right? Like it's a non-zero, outcome potentially. As we've seen, look, like last cycle, everyone was just like everything is going to be on ETH. The institutions are caring about ETH. Everyone's building on Polygon. You have like accounting firms building Polygon on Polygon. You had like Nike and all those brands building on Polygon, and people are just like, look, like the rails are being built in the EVM space. This is where everyone seems to be concentrating. Solana is nowhere to be found here, and they have a massive, massive, I guess, pitfall of trying to catch up. Like Solana barely works. Like it just was pretty damn clunky. If you guys remember, I mean, I basically gave up before even before the cycle was over because it just sucks to use more often than not. And then you have, out of nowhere this cycle, Solana has had the most like payment TradFi integrations. You've had basically RWAs like Fidelity say, yeah, like on second thought, we're launching on Solana. And so if you just think how long ago that was 3 years ago, guys. Like that's 3 years of progress. And so there is this non-zero event that in the next 3 years there's going to be a Solana killer, and everything that
Isn't
we're
that kind of Sui? Isn't that kind of what Sui is?
well,
People's
that's
speculation there.
that's really what Sui's trying to go for. That's really what Monad is trying to go for. That's what Mega ETH is trying to go for. So look, at the end of the day, like, what are you going to bet on? Like, what's been around from time and time again? Like, it's Bitcoin, and so your meme coins, your digital assets on Ethereum could, erode in value and go to zero if no one cares about, Ethereum. And similarly on Solana, people can do exactly the same. But I mean, like, what keeps me grounded just holding any of these Bitcoin ordinals and even Bitcoin meme coins is they're built on Bitcoin and they're not really going anywhere. And they're going to be adopted by any sort of like L1, L1.5, L2 innovations as, the quote unquote original Bitcoin meme coins. Even if ordinals and runes were to die on the L1, they're still going to make their way to some of these environments, and they're still going to live on Bitcoin as these like like, quote unquote like Genesis meme coins of this era. I think there's a compelling story here that like downside protection. I don't really sweat at all at night just holding all these things. Like, yeah, ultimately would have rather bought everything right now when they're at the 60 to 80 to even 90% discount, and literally bought my positions for a fraction of the price, or doubled or even tripled the size of my positions that I'm holding right now. But at the end of the day, it's still on Bitcoin, and it matters enough to most people that I'm not really breaking a sweat. The other really cool part is, and I want to get your take on this, just throwing this as an idea, but what if you had the ability to buy anything on ordinals or runes with any digital asset from any chain, but it would still settle on Bitcoin? It wouldn't necessarily, I would say, mint you a wrapper. But say MetaMask had Bitcoin integration, um, and we wanted to buy like runes from my MetaMask wallet. Do you think that has merit? And then it would just sit on my MetaMask in my MetaMask runes. Um, I would say like column, or like my tokens, or for example, like that would require the liquidity to sit primarily on the L1 because the assets would never really go anywhere else. But I don't know, Speed. Like, do you think that makes sense?
It does. I mean, I got to take off here pretty quick, but but it's kind of like what Magic Eden is trying to do, right? I mean, in the sense, so you're saying that, like, say you had ETH in a MetaMask wallet and you wanted to buy a rune, then
Yeah, I
you
guess
would you
I
would
guess that is
you'd
what
kick.
that is what Magic Eden's trying to go for, right? They're trying to go for spend your soul and buy, any, I guess, Bitcoin asset.
Right.
That's true.
From a user side, it looks like it's all being done, but there's a lot of back end stuff that's happening. The issue that can happen on that is it's kind of more that buy and hold stuff works great. It doesn't work good for just because of if anyone's done any of the swaps, from say like Sol to BTC or ETH to BTC, that stuff just takes a while to happen through that mechanism. So if that stuff were able to be sped up, or maybe it's more instantaneous and then it's basically settled by the wallet itself once it comes through maybe that transaction comes directly to them. But I think that's ultimately what all these side chains have tried to do. They just can't interoperate just because of their coding languages and how they're being built. Is they're trying to kind of silo themselves in, and when in reality they're choking each other off.
Well, Zeus
um,
Zeus was trying to do this with BTC, right? It was trying to be the interop network, and I don't know where they are at because they were supposed to launch in the summertime, and I mean it's
Well,
we're
Cosmos tried to do it, but again, that was just within a siloed ecosystem. So I mean, there's a lot of those that kind of try to do that, but I think it would be great because again, we go back to the average buyer and seller. Everyone's lazy. They don't want to learn a new system. They just want to buy the asset, and ultimately, when you go buy something, you don't need to know each store's mechanics of what works in a different token. You just take out your credit card and swipe it, right, and then you get it. You don't need a new credit card for every single store. And I think if you can get that on the fungible and non-fungible side, on Bitcoin and other chains, I think it would be great for the user side of things because that's where, I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact we can be very technical in these spaces and on chain, but the average person doesn't want to be technical. They just say, hey, my buddy told me to go buy this thing called a puppet. How do I do it? And where can I get it? And they just want to click a button. And so, my final point, and then I got to take off, going back to what you said on ordinals, if NFTs are going to be successful, I think ordinals, will be leading that pack in the long run. Again, we're thinking long run, just from the technical standpoint of why they are distinctly different. And so I agree completely with your sentiment on ordinals. It's like I sleep very well at night. If I'm going to speculate on NFTs, being around for the long run, that's basically what ordinals are meant for.
yeah,
So
I know you have to drop off, but this is a really good point. Is like ordinals are the best NFT, I would say I wouldn't say like launchpad just yet, but it is like the best place to put NFTs on chain. And if all we had and NFTs are not something that need to be traded at a very fast pace anyways. So if you could just buy an NFT with any digital asset and then sell it afterwards, the selling part is the harder part because then I guess you have to sell it, and some people on Sol want Sol, and if you came from Sol and you spent Sol, kind of I guess it kind of creates a bit of a clunky kind of UX experience. Maybe they don't want to sell and then have Bitcoin in their wallet address. They want it to go directly back into Sol. Robert, what's up? You guys just announced something from Stafflow. Do you want to chat briefly about that? There's some eyeballs here. Is it true that I can list any of my ordinals on Magic Eden with Stafflow's front end now?
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of teasing some stuff that we're working on at the moment. As you noted, we're really cognizant at this point that there's a lot of fragmentation, mostly on the rune side, but definitely a little on the ordinal side as well. We think there are some gaps in the trading experience that we're trying to fill. But yeah, the alpha is you can actually list ordinals and runes on multiple marketplaces now on Satflow. It's obviously not a full aggregated experience like on the end-to-end life cycle of a trade yet, but we'll have some exciting stuff we're going to be sharing in the upcoming weeks about that.
Cool. And I guess, what are your thoughts? So I know we touched on like buying ordinals with Sol with ETH maybe. But like, do you think people care about selling these things and having them sold into like ETH or Sol? Like, if we're able to buy any digital asset on Bitcoin, or let's simplify. If we can buy ordinals with Solana, do you think people or users care when they list to sell it in Bitcoin terms to be receiving that in Sol? If you bought it in Sol, is there any way to like receive Sol afterwards? Like, I don't know. Like, does that matter?
Yeah, I don't know about that piece. Like, I don't know, like, I want to sell my ordinal for Sol, like, ordinals or runes. Like, generally, I think, if you're trying to sell, you just need to be selling into the native currency on whatever chain you're on at the time. Like, we've seen this with CryptoPunks, like, they're still denominated with ETH, nearly 7 years later. I don't think that's going to change on the Bitcoin side. However, from a like purchase standpoint, I do think there's quite a lot of friction in buying Bitcoin native assets with other currencies. Like even in the most popular wallets at this point, there's so much friction to buy Bitcoin, to buy ordinals and runes. Like Phantom still doesn't have in wallet swaps, so users are kind of forced to go through like a SEX, and it's not always mobile friendly. It can be delayed. Like by the time that Bitcoin puppet that you wanted to buy is like by the time your funds are moved, like it's maybe the asset you're trying to buy is already sold. So yeah, I think there's an onboarding issue from a liquidity standpoint, and there's a lot to be done to improve this UX.
I guess that's true, right? It's the buy that you want to be fast, sometimes not the sell, because the sell is a listing. And so as long as it's denominated in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin isn't gonna move to zero basically fast enough for you to say, hey, like now I can just easily swap within the wallet from Bitcoin to Sol. I didn't realize that Phantom wallet doesn't actually have Bitcoin to Sol swaps within it just yet. I guess that's just a Magic Eden thing for now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Magic Eden Wallet is 100 or maybe 1,000 times smaller than Phantom, right? Like Phantom, I've said this so many times on the show, but Phantom is coordinating the largest hot ball of money in our entire industry right now, by far, by a mile, right? And yeah, there's some easy wins that will come from Phantom enabling in-app ETH sold to BTC.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, kind of excited to see what comes about from that. Obviously, cross marketplace listings are quite important too, because it kind of levels out the stage of every marketplace then has the same listings, and there's still people on the Asian side that use OKX marketplace or OKX wallet app exclusively, that don't check other marketplace. We've seen this price discrepancy oftentimes actually, where uh, more specifically on like the BRC20 side, where you had people buying BRC20s at like 5 or even 10% above other marketplaces floor prices, um, just because they just didn't want to go to Magic Eden or Unisat, right? Like it's a very inefficient market, and I think that's a gap that is worthwhile to solve. I suspect, to make it much more efficient from a, I would say, user experience perspective, to just know that you have the best price at all times. Sweet. Thoughts as Chimera? I know we kind of you guys came up just after we talked about Chimera, but wanted to give you guys the opportunity to chat about the BTC 100 Index Fund, which will pool all the top 100 L1 assets, including inscriptions, runes, BRC20, into one token, giving you exposure to. Okay, all right. Let's get you speaking about it. Like, how are you guys doing this? And how is this basically like a DAO token? In a way, a DAO fund.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar to that. Well, first of all, thanks for having me up. Yeah, just super excited to be up here with all these awesome builders. Um, but yeah, no, I just wanted to address some of the things you had mentioned, because I do have an answer for you there in terms of how we're keeping the price pegged. But first to just kind of zoom out. So we're actually going to start with the top 10, not the top 100. So that tweet up there is a little bit old. Um, because obviously this space is still very nascent. And, trying to rebalance the portfolio with 100 assets on Bitcoin, you're going to lose a lot on like fees and slippage and all. So we're going to start with just the top 10. Um, but yeah, right now what we have on live on testnet 4 on Arch Network is really just the system that tokenizes inscriptions. So that's like the first step that will enable us to basket inscriptions alongside fungible tokens all into one larger ETF. But yeah, the way that we're able to keep the price pegged, because you had mentioned, sometimes the fund token could trade, below or sometimes even above the NAV of the underlying assets. With our system, you can actually redeem the underlying assets. So that, I think will keep the price pegged, because if you hold this index token, you can trade it in and receive proportionately the underlying assets that it owns. But yeah, so it's similar to a DAO token. It's a fund where we would own all these underlying assets. And yeah, since whoever holds that index token can trade it in and redeem those underlying assets, it would hopefully stay pegged to the overall price of it.
So the question here is like, how do you manage the redemption piece? So obviously, it's going to be proportional to the amount that's raised or the market cap or what have you. But if I had $1,000, I'm not getting a fractionalized or like yeah, like there's no way for me to get like point, one puppet point,
Well,
yeah.
so that's the initial technology that we just launched on testnet. The trustless fractionalization for inscriptions. So we're calling ourselves a hybrid DeFi platform because that's kind of the core, underpinning of our framework. We're tokenizing inscriptions, permissionlessly, trustlessly, so that that will be step one of all of this. So imagine a world where this is all live, right? You could trade in your, say, Node Monkey and redeem 100,000 of these Node Monkey, essentially index tokens that represent the floor price of Node Monkeys. So if each Node Monkey is worth 100,000 of these rune tokens, you have, a billion supply of the token. That asset is always going to stay pegged to the floor price, through arbitrage. And again, that redemption mechanism is what keeps them pegged. So, once we create that inscription token system, then we have all of these assets reduced down to fungible tokens. So, the index will contain nothing but those fungible tokens. So you'll have, the floor price runes, then you'll have regular runes, you'll also have BRC20s. So, yeah, that this initial framework that's live now is what allows us to fractionalize inscriptions and turn them into fungible tokens.
Pretty cool. I get it. I get it. Yeah, excited to see that. Eventually on mainnet. But we'll definitely play around with it on testnet on Arch. I know we got Randy up here. What's going on, Randy?
What's up, farmer? How are you?
Doing well. Keeping up with the bear market blues. I don't know. Some days are better than others, but still, optimistic and bullish. It's just getting punched in the gut every single day. These floor prices keep going down.
The floors are falling out from under you.
The floors are falling out, but yeah, you won't see a crash out moment from me. No chance.
I don't know. Sounds like you're on the verge here. Yeah, I haven't even been paying attention to prices. I'm working, baby. We're working hard out here.
What are you guys cooking up? Because I saw your comment. Apparently it's something arts related, or is it BSV related, or well, what the heck is going on?
Oh, my few comment on the well, no, Harry's just I
Yeah,
mean,
Harry,
my
fun for Harry.
interpretation of what Harry was saying is that UTXO chains are barely competing in the scalable blockchain space. I mean, and when we say barely, it's like if the only one is BSV, then it's basically there is no competing at all. There's none. So that's what he was saying, and basically what we're saying. What I'm thinking is that seems to be bullish for UTXO chains that are trying to play in this Solana base hyperliquid game. Because I think UTXO chains are the future. I think that's kind of my team's MO here, if I could speak for the guys. So yeah, that's what we were talking about. But that was pretty much the last time I checked Twitter until now. I've been cooking on some fun creative stuff, working on some brands. Built out the Area 21 website, which is in my bio if anyone wants to check it out. It's just basically offering the services that we've done for our own companies, for new clients and stuff like that. And then we're also working on this big Arch project where we're building out the infrastructure for Arch APL tokens. So Arch's native token standard. That infrastructure is getting built by our team right now, and we're starting to think about how we can productize it. So now I'm getting into the branding of all of that and the landing page and getting everything ready to look nice.
Very nice, very nice. And Fleur69,
Mm-hmm.
what is this?
Fleur is a on-chain order book and exchange concept that was built on Fractal Bitcoin, but essentially Fractal kind of gave up on us, and we've been sleeping on that. But that idea is awesome, and the experience that we got there is very valuable, especially if BTC enables OpCat.
That's sweet. I know Harry was talking about it as like, let's just bring the order book into on chain, right? I think that's really what this brings is there is no centralized piece. Everyone has access to the same order book. I think
Yeah, it's
that's
like
pretty cool.
public database, order book, verified on chain, doesn't need any infrastructure. You just need to figure out how to like index it properly, basically. And that, I mean, that idea is like super bullish in the future. If we ever get UTXO chains at scale, we're gonna be the fucking kings of that shit.
It is quite an interesting idea because then it removes all of this, order book liquidity fragmentation, even on chain, right? Like the reason why we have aggregators is because this problem exists. So it sounds like this kind of solves it, but it only works with UTXO based blockchains. Is that the logic here?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Cool. And still bullish Fractal, or like what are your thoughts on Fractal? Like, is
I
there a
was never
comeback
bullish
story there?
Fractal, first of all.
Right.
We thought that Fractal was gonna do a fork of Bitcoin that scaled, and they didn't end up doing that. So we kind of bailed.
Got it.
No,
What?
we're bullish Arch. We're strictly bullish Arch network. We're gonna be building on Arch. I'm really just like organizing everything right now and designing everything. Like I'm building new websites, designing products. I'm thinking about the language and communication, marketing, branding, all of that stuff. Doing brand kits. Like I'm doing a lot of getting back to my roots, creative work. So much so that I'm not even paying attention to the shitty markets, and I love it.
Yeah. You used to be shitcoin trading pretty left, right, and center
Well,
back in.
when Ordinal's
Yeah.
wallet was, profitable every day, and we didn't actually have to, um, it didn't need branding, design, update UX every single day. It was just rocking and rolling. I mean, we were just riding the gravy train. I was shitcoining, because what else is there to do? But now there's new businesses to be made, and there's new networks coming out like Arch, especially Arch. So we're ripping, we're gripping and ripping right now.
I love it. I love it. Randy's back to being locked in arc, basically.
Locked in, yeah. Hungry.
Let's go. Um, yeah, I mean, thoughts, reflections on Ordinal's Wallet as a marketplace. Is there
Most
a comeback
successful
story?
business I've ever created. Over $220 million in volume transacted. 125,000 followers. Biggest brand I ever made. Fuck yeah. Ordinals Wallet killed it, and I'm super super proud of the work that we did there. Um, the only thing is that I'm a little bit kind of coming to terms with is that it's slowing to a halt, and that's really sad. It's sad to see your baby. We were doing 24-hour days on computers with four guys in a fucking hacker house, like trying to get ordinals out first. That was, the arc and story of it was a beautiful story, and then for it to have come and gone within 3 years, kind of is sad. It's very sad to me. And then also like Twitch is another one that is a similar thing where it was like I'm super proud of the work I did there, and I'm super sad to see that it's shut down. And it's just kind of the way that it is in this space. Everything just comes and goes, and you have to be willing to pick up your rucksack and move on, or you're just gonna get cooked. Like we're not gonna go now and say, hey, we did $220 million in volume through this website. Now we need to go raise a bunch of money because it's not making money anymore, and then like get into debt with investors, and then be stuck working on this project that is like slowing down. And the whole thing is just like, no, you need to cut your losses and build the new. And every time we build new, we build better. It's bigger every single time, and it's more exciting. It's a bigger product. I mean, we're like the scrappiest team in the game. No funding, no nothing, just banging out products on hot viral ideas and succeeding with that. And that's the coolest thing ever.
No,
I
I like
mean,
it. I like it. I mean, Ordinal's wallet to me is kind of near and dear to my heart too, because I was a massive early fan supporter on the spaces. I kind of saw the baby grow, and the features kind
bro,
of get stacked.
when we were doing Bitcoin punks, when you were inscribing them through us, that was, first of all, that was how I found out about Bitcoin punks, which is a huge W for my team. But beyond that, I had fucking 3 devs cooking Ordinal's wallet like fucking 4 in the morning while I'm on the fucking horn inscribing thousands of the first ordinals for me and for people at the same time, making sure that they get to the people, getting the money in the, like I'm doing sales, I'm doing inscribing, I'm talking to you. That was like the craziest, most wheeling and dealing through the internet that I've ever
Dude,
done, and that was so much fun.
I miss having so much fun like that. The momentum was just so surreal, and
Dude, people were calling, like Bungie was calling me, like verge of crying, like, bro, just please, like, give me one punk. Like he could, because no one could inscribe. There was no way to inscribe. Ordinal's bot was down. There was no inscriber tool.
dude,
That
those were the glory days. I really do reflect on those as like some of the greatest moments in my Ordinals Bitcoin Web3 life.
phone ringing
Oh
off the
my
hook.
god, it was
Everybody's
so good.
ready to throw money around. That shit was so much fun.
It
Yeah.
was so crazy. I
Man.
just remember like spinning this website up as like a pure experiment, bitcoinpunks.com, and like it was just so crazy that within like a matter of days, these like free mints, that everyone was paying like, $1 for or less were like, like at peak, I mean, they were trading on Ethereum for like, I don't know, like 3 ETH. Like it was just insane. It was the most degenerate
Dude,
shit possible.
I was back selling those bitches. I had this dude in Dubai who was slanging Bitcoin punks for me left and right. I think we probably sold like hundreds of them through this dude in Dubai. It was just the craziest thing. People were hitting me up everywhere. My DMs on Discord are still backed up by the thousands from Ordinal's, day one.
Dude, I love those days. And then businessman tweeting like there is no more there is no greater asymmetric opportunity to turn $1 into like $20,000. Doing the comparison of like here's the example of like Bitcoin punks, here's the example of like early inscriptions, here's the example of like Ordi and Sats and everything else you could have possibly got on Bitcoin. And yeah, I guess we were living in a bit of a bubble. And
You think? I mean, but I knew what it was. I was just having fun and capitalizing on the moment. I mean, I think that's what is this game? What's the name of this game, really? It's like it's bubbles on bubbles on bubbles. It's meta bubbles.
Well, we're just patiently waiting for the next bubble, and I think it's going to come back to Bitcoin, and the interest is certainly, I guess, generally hasn't faded. So we'll be back. We'll be back. It's just we need a
Well,
new opportunity.
I mean, really what happened is every time there was a momentum that was capable of like creating a new floor, it was stifled by the network. And what Arch is doing is saving everybody from that. So it's like there is technologies that are coming, right? We're seeing Odin Fun doing more volume than like on-chain volume. That's what's going to happen. That's the only way that Bitcoin assets and ecosystem succeeds. And then you enter a bigger game, right? You enter into the Coinbase, Solana, Hyperliquid game, and so now we're talking about like big boy games. You can't do that on L1 on BTC unless you're doing it with Arch. So Arch needs to launch. We need to get this APL standard recognized. I mean, it's going to have runes and it's going to have native, and so that's some of the integral work that we're doing there. And Odin Fun is just validation for all of this.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on Odin Fun here.
It's
Yeah, obviously,
validation. It's perfect. I mean, how else can you say you know for a fact that something like this is going to be successful unless somebody does it? And they're not doing their own network. It's not going to be like a foundation layer network. So it's just without that, it's just validation. Otherwise, it's competition.
love it. Yeah, no, totally agree. I got to get going, so we got to start wrapping up the show. But it was good to kind of reminisce on the good times, reflect on like where we're at, and maybe there's some hopium and some copium on the show. But look, I think I'm just generally still happy and thriving and absolutely surviving for sure. But yeah, we'll pick this up next Tuesday. I think, yeah, next Tuesday. Randy, are you gonna be in East Denver or any of those things? I know Matt's gonna be there. Robert's gonna be there.
I think
Uh,
so. I think the team's going to have to show up. What days are you going?
I'll be there from the Wednesday to the Saturday, so we'll probably cross paths
26th,
to the first.
26th to the 1st. Okay. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I'm supposed to go to Florida on Monday. We'll see.
Pull up, pull up. There's a Bitcoin Builders penthouse that you can.
Come jerk you guys off at.
All right, all right, all right. See you guys next Tuesday. Appreciate you guys coming up here and thankful to have all the good speakers and the builders come and join and share what they're working on. Till next time, guys. Take
See ya.
care.